You're listening to PetLifeRadio.com.
Is your pet stressed out? Does your pet need annual vaccines? Which pet is best for a child? Would you know if your dog was in pain? Pet Life Radio presents The Pet Doctor, where you'll learn everything about keeping your pet healthy and happy. From pet care, pet meds and grooming, to pet food, pet insurance, and dental care, this is the place to find out everything there is to know about pet wellness. Whether you have a dog, cat, reptile, or rabbit, you'll find answers for your pets straight from the vets, because it's your pet. Health matters. Please welcome your Pet Doctor host, veterinary media consultant and veterinarian, Dr. Bernadine Cruz.
Is your Corgi incorrigible? Does your poodle ponder life more than bound headlong into the fray at the dog park? Why does one dog seem to be a genius and another can barely find its way out of the backyard? Is knowing how and what your dog is thinking helpful for caring for your dog? And what does this information do for the mental well-being of their owners? My guest is Dr. Brian Hare, a professor of evolutionary anthropology. He received his Ph.D. from Harvard University, founded the Duke Canine Cognition Center at Duke University, and is a cynophilist, a dog lover. We'll examine how to play, discover, and connect with our best friends through Dognition. We'll be right back after the short break.
Please have a seat in the waiting room. The doctor will be with you shortly, right after these messages.
Dog Shelter Blues, the new novel by Mark Conkling. This hard-hitting story lights up the world of animal rescue with engaging characters and their pets, struggling with their own internal demons as they attempt to rescue innocent creatures that sometimes bring a mysterious transforming power to broken lives. Read the first chapter of Dog Shelter Blues free at dogshelterblues.com. Then come along a breathtaking journey that ends with an astonishing triumph of good over evil. Order your copy of Dog Shelter Blues today. Available at Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com.
Let's Talk Pets on PetLifeRadio.com. Welcome back to The Pet Doctor on Pet Life Radio with Dr. Bernadine Cruz. The doctor is in, and we'll see you now.
Dr. Hare, this is really a fascinating program that you have. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Oh, it's a total delight. I'm excited to talk with you.
Well, number one, I think everyone wants to know, so how intelligent is a dog?
Well, the fun thing about my job is that's all I sit around thinking about all day. And I don't just study dogs. I study lots of different animals. I study bonobos and chimpanzees, which are both our closest relatives alive today. I study young human infants. I study lemurs. And I also study other species of primates. So I spend a lot of time with a lot of different types of animals, and I'm always thinking about animal intelligence. And what this area of research has sort of revealed to us is that really thinking about a linear scale where some species is smarter than the other species doesn't really make much sense, really, if you're just going to say, there's sponges at the bottom and humans at the top, because each species has its own genius. And, every species is unique. That's how we recognize them as different species. So in the case of dogs, what I think is genius about them is that among all the different types of intelligence there are, they are remarkable at using humans as tools and using their social problem-solving abilities to overcome areas where they don't understand a lot of things, because they work together with humans who do understand things that they can't understand. So it lets them solve a bunch of problems that they couldn't solve otherwise. And really, in the animal world, they're really quite unique for that. And so other species, of course, have their own genius, but that's what the genius of dogs is.
So it really is true. You just said that dogs use us, so they've trained us in many ways.
Right. That's right. No, absolutely. I mean, it's a two-way interaction. Anybody, if you stop and think about it, realizes that your dog is pursuing its own interest as well as, trying to be a good partner in the relationship. And so absolutely. And not just in your own relationship, but over evolutionary time. If we think back, not just of the last year or the last 100 years, but if we think about the last 10,000 years or 20,000 years, essentially dogs have had a big effect on the history or the prehistory of our species.
Some people have actually said that when dogs came into, prehistoric man's village and was now part of their clan, so to speak, that because they were there and they are allowing people to finally, I can sleep now because I have this dog that's going to be out there, and if there's a problem, it's going to bark. Because of them, it allowed us to advance and become basically what we are today.
Well, definitely, they certainly must have played a role, and and I do agree that dogs alerting humans to intruders would have been incredibly helpful, because actually the thing they would have been worried about, for the majority of our species history, we did not live as agriculturalists and we did not live as industrialists. Obviously, we lived as hunter-gatherers, and we lived in small groups of 150 individuals, and there was lots of fighting between small groups of people, and the way that fighting occurred was people would sneak into neighboring groups and do bad things to them at night. And so, if you have a dog who can alert you to the presence, or a proto-dog even, to the presence of some strange person, or any person really, that's going to help you defend yourself. And so I think a lot of people might think, oh, well, dogs would help defend against predators. But truthfully, I don't think any predator would have been going around humans, because humans are famous for being hyper carnivorous and hyper predators that wiped out actually predator guilds everywhere. So I think the main thing dogs did was protect us from other humans.
Very good. So cooperation early on, our early guard dogs. First of all, with your Dognition, people have never heard that term before. They've heard of cognition. If you could define for the listeners, what is cognition?
So cognition is the recognition and celebration of all different types of intelligence. So the idea is that there's lots of different skills, and that just because you're genius in one area does not mean you're genius in all areas. And just because you may not be particularly skilled in one area doesn't mean that you're not genius in another. And it's also sort of the rejection that there's one type of intelligence that we can just put a number on it. And that, you're a 54 and he's 100, or she's a 72. It's much more complicated and far more interesting than that. And that's what cognition is. And it's also the recognition that humans and animals are capable of inferential reasoning, and that many times animals need to solve problems to survive much faster than just simple trial and error learning would allow for. If you had to learn over 1,000 interactions what a predator is, you would not be alive anymore. So often you need to be able to make inferences in the real world to solve problems very quickly. You can't afford to make a mistake even once in many contexts if you're going to survive. And so animals are capable of making inferences. And that's the fun thing about cognition, is finding where is it that animals are capable of solving a new problem they've never seen before, and often through making an inference. And we have evidence that dogs are capable of that in some context. And so that's what Dognition is, the study of dog cognition.
It's fascinating. Looking at your website, you have some various games that you can be playing with your dog to learn how they think and what it means when they do certain behaviors. You have one where you have a treat and you put it down, the dog has to sit, and you point at it. Talk about that test, because I thought that was really fascinating. And I know you have other ways that you're playing with your dog and what you're learning, but how about that test in particular?
Well, so I think the first thing is that there's really been an absolute revolution in our understanding of dogs in the last 10 years. And I think that's the first thing for people to understand, is that science, and particularly cognitive science, was not particularly interested in dogs. And now we are very interested. And because of that, there's been this explosion in methodologies to examine how dogs think. And so the game that you use an example where you put two treats on the ground, you point to one, not the other. It's really just a simple question. There is no real problem to solve here. It's really a preference test of, okay, I'm going to eat one of the pieces of food. Which one do I go to first? Is it that your dog is so communicative, so cooperative, and so reliant on things times that you tell it that it goes to where you point, even though it can see both pieces of food? Or is your dog one that, it definitely will listen to you in some context, but in this one, there's no problem to solve. Hey, I can do this on my own. I don't need to go where you point for me. And it's a wonderful example of, just revealing that, first of all, not all dogs are solving the same problem the same way. And just like we've studied different species and shown that, just because one species is a genius in one area doesn't mean they are in another, and that a different species could be a genius in an area where another species is really not very talented. Exactly the same when you're talking about individuals. Just like people, you can have dogs that have strategies they really rely on, and then other dogs that don't rely on that same strategy, use a completely different technique to interact with their world and solve problems. So that game is one where you can reveal, hey, this is a really communicative dog, one that really relies on people trying to help them and cooperate, versus a dog that, well, they may listen to what you say, but in some context, they're just completely self-reliant and happy to do it on their own.
You mentioned earlier on that several years ago, people would never have thought of studying the intelligence of dogs. And you're studying human babies as well as lemurs and all these other critters. So why this interest now in dogs?
Well, basically what happened was myself and Adam McCloskey, and we have many colleagues to thank as well, independently at the exact same time in 1998 discovered the exact same thing. He discovered it in Hungary and we discovered it in the United States, is that dogs are able to use human gestures and communicate with humans in a number of ways that resembles what we see human infants begin to do as they start to interact with others and acquire cultural abilities. So it's the same communicative abilities, understanding if you point or understanding the direction that you look, that human infants use to start learning how to communicate in a new way, learning how to learn from humans things that otherwise they could never learn on their own. And dogs are doing the exact same thing. Making it even more fun is the fact that our closest relatives, bonobos and chimpanzees, as smart as they are, they don't have that ability. So people are fascinated. Science is just absolutely thrilled by this question of how it could be that such a distant relative to humans has an ability that we think is crucial to the success of our own species.
And the premise is we've been cooperating with each other over the eons. Is that the reason for it? Do you have a speculation?
Well, we wrote a whole book about it. And The Genius of Dogs is a review of all the studies and the ideas and the arguments about why that happened. But the take-home message is it's a result of domestication. And that, in evolving, and actually wolves choosing to live near humans, not humans choosing to domesticate wolves, because I don't think the evidence supports that. It's actually wolves choosing to live near us. They actually began to evolve into proto-dogs and eventually into the dogs that we know, and that as a result of that, they developed these remarkable abilities. So it's actually not a straightforward story, because it could have as easily been that, well, the reason dogs develop these abilities is because just thousands of hours of interacting with us, each individual dog within their own lifetime. It could have been that wolves are just naturally really good at this, and dogs have inherited that ability from wolves. But we've been able to do studies and show that in both of those cases, that's not what's going on. Dogs are doing something much more remarkable than even that. It's probably a result of domestication.
How did you discover that dogs were able to read human gestures? Because, yes, you think of, here's a primate, and if you were to point to something, it would seem, intuitive. They would just look and understand what you were doing because they have to cooperate in their tribes. But that doesn't seem to be the case.
No. So bonobos, for instance, are incredibly cooperative. It ends up that, females are dominant, and there's no aggression at the rate that you see in our other close relative chimpanzees. The bonobos are incredibly egalitarian and peaceful. They work together very easily to solve problems. They're wonderful at sharing food. They have rich social relationships. But something they don't do is they don't really share information about where food is. So they don't try to tell each other how to find food. If they see somebody find food, they're happy to take advantage of that. And they don't really use gestures to communicate to each other really while they're cooperating. They might gesture to one another to say, hey, come groom me, or hey, I want to play chase. But to say, hey, look over there, there's a leopard, or hey, look over there, there's somebody you'd be interested in interacting with, or hey, look over there, there's food. They don't do that. And when we play games with them to test their ability to learn from gestures like young infants do, they really show very little skill, whereas that's where dogs are absolutely unbelievable.
Wow, this has just been so exciting. We're talking right now to Dr. Brian Hare. He is with Dognition, and we're learning about ways that dogs are so different from other species, how they cooperate, and how they train us. So I'm going to train you to sit, listen. We're going to have a short break and be right back.
Please have a seat in the waiting room. The doctor will be with you shortly, right after these messages.
Are you crazy about cats? If so, check out The World is Your Litter Box, Deluxe Edition. This clever how-to manual for cats, written by a cat named Quasi, contains more laughs than should be allowable in one book, and is poignantly underscored by the combative yet loving relationship between Quasi and his human. The World is Your Litter Box, Deluxe Edition, is guaranteed to have you laughing your tail off. So, treat yourself to a copy today. Available from Amazon.
Hi, this is Tim Link, animal communicator and pet expert and host of Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. Have you ever wanted to know what your pet is really thinking? Do you want to find out if they truly understand what you're trying to tell them? Ever wish you could build a better understanding and closer relationship with your pet? Well, now you can. Learning to Communicate with Animals is a 4-part on-demand workshop. In the workshop, you'll learn the essential techniques that are necessary to communicate with animals, including what is animal communication, breathing correctly to achieve the perfect state to communicate with your animals at a deeper level, using guided meditation exercises and method to communicate with animals, and how to send and receive information from your animals. So if you're wanting to learn how to communicate and connect with your animals at a deeper level, visit PetLifeRadio.com/workshop and purchase and download Learning to Communicate with Animals. You'll be glad you did.
Having a rough day? Longing for the dog days of summer? Think your fun furry friend lives a dog's life? Well, find out everything you're begging to know as Pet Life Radio presents It's a Doggy Dog World with pet expert and award-winning author Liz Palaika, Kate Abbott, and Petra Burke. Every dog has his day, and you'll find out how to make your dog's day fun and rewarding. Every week, on demand, only on PetLifeRadio.com.
Let's talk pets.
Let's talk pets
On Pet Life Radio.
Pet Life Radio.
PetLifeRadio.com. Welcome back to the Pet Doctor on Pet Life Radio with Dr. Bernadine Cruz. The doctor is in, and we'll see you now.
Dr. Hare, on your website, you have canine cognition dimensions. And this is fascinating because you have these various parameters: empathy, cunning, communication, memory, and reasoning. How do you test for these?
Well, so those are, because people have gotten so excited and developed so many different tests to look at the cognitive abilities of dogs. We, along with experts in the field of animal cognition, I got together with folks and we thought about what are the core competencies, what are the core things that make a dog successful. And so that's what those 5 types of intelligence are. Again, they're empathy, communication, cunning, memory, and reasoning. And the idea is that we think that every successful dog, we're going to see in each of these types of intelligence, what is the strategy they use to solve problems that involve either being, in the case of empathy, being highly bonded with a human or maybe not so bonded relative to other dogs. Perhaps they're going to be an incredibly communicative dog or one that's really self-reliant relative to other dogs. Perhaps they're going to be a dog that is really cunning or wily, or maybe they're very trustworthy. Maybe it's a dog that's really reliant on its memory. Maybe it's a dog that's not. Maybe it's a dog that is incredible at making inferences and reasoning to solve problems. There are other dogs that don't rely on that as a strategy. So by running dogs through a series of 10 games, we can help you understand what are the strategies your dog uses in its everyday life to be the dog you love, the individual you love, and that, allows it to solve problems the way that it does. And, I think the experience that people have had, first of all, is having fun with their dog doing this. And then secondly is, learning not only about their dog, but also about themselves and, their interaction with their dog. So, the goal here is to measure some core competencies and help you understand what are the strategies your dog uses, because you can have a dog that's really reliant on memory, not so reliant on communication. You can have a dog that's super empathic and really bonded with you. You can have another dog that actually is really amazing at inferential reasoning relative to other dogs. So it's just totally fun to find out what your dog is doing and what makes it tick in the way that it is.
In doing these tests, have you found that, what's the age that you can start at these testings? Because you might say, I want a very empathetic dog. I'm looking to get a new dog. I have this puppy. Can I start a puppy on this test, or do I have to wait until it's a certain age?
Well, most of these tests we know, the one thing I didn't say is all the games that you'll play are based on published studies. So this isn't me sitting around imagining what might measure dog psychology. This is scientists have worked for over a decade. We've published, we've replicated, other people have criticized, then we've perfected, and lots of great minds have agreed that these tests are really, really good to measure the things that they're meant to measure. And they're based on the scientific literature. And, we can go and point you to the publications and the rationale behind them. And in terms of when you could start doing them, the best evidence currently is that, a 6-month-old dog can handle these things very easily. Below that, I think, somewhere between 4 and 6 months old, somewhere between 4 and 6 months old, you should be fine. But there are going to be some dogs that are, 4 months old that might struggle. So really what we're recommending currently with the current set of games we have is that, you wait till somewhere between 4 and 6 months old. That said, part of what we're going to be doing and what we are doing is we have a subscription program. What I'm describing is the original set of games that give you your dog's cognitive profile. Once you get that cognitive profile, though, we have a subscription program where each month we'll be revealing a new game that you can play with your dog. And some of those subscription games will be really great for puppies. And so that'll be really fun, too.
And any breed can do this. So if you have that Jack Russell Terrier that is probably the Jack Russell terrorist because it's such a crazy bouncing off the wall dog, and you have that laid back little Shih Tzu, you can do the testing with all breeds. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And here's one I think will surprise people the most, which is, first of all, this is a worldwide endeavor. Everybody is able to play this anywhere in the world. We're having folks from Canada, Great Britain, Germany, Austria, Japan, Australia. We've had dogs registered from India, from Africa, South America. A lot of people in Chile got excited about this. So what we're going to be able to do is look at dogs from all over the world, and not only that, but of all breeds and all ages and, both sexes and different mixes of breeds, etc. And one of the things that science just has not had the ability to do until Dognition is to tell you anything about any of those variables as it relates to your dog's psychology. So at the Duke Canine Cognition Center that I founded here at Duke in 2009, we can only test about 300 dogs a year because we just don't have the capability to do more. And if you think about that, okay, well, that sounds like a lot maybe, but if you think about how many dog breeds there are, AKC, for instance, considers 177 breeds. Well, I would need at least 100 individuals per breed to look at any one cognitive variable. So let's say I just wanted to know, are there breed differences in a measure of empathy? Well, I have to test 177 times 100 dogs. I can't even do that calculation. It's so big. I would do that the rest of my career and never finish. So the reason, if you go to the published literature based on scientific research and say, okay, tell me about breed differences, scientist person. Well, I say to you, well, I can only tell you as a person. I can't tell you as a scientist. My opinion isn't any better than your opinion because we don't have any good, rigorous data to say, you know what, a poodle is amazing when it comes to inferential reasoning. Chihuahuas have amazing memory. Great Danes, unbelievable when it comes to their empathy scores. Currently, I cannot tell you that, but Dognition is going to let us do that. And that is the tool and the vehicle to do it. If everybody gets excited about finding out the cognitive profile of their dog, we are all going to have the joy of finding out the answers to all these questions we want to know the answers to.
I love it because you call them citizen scientists. So here I am, just Joe Blow dog owner, and I don't know how to do these tests. I have no idea what it means. The dog looked at that and, did a certain response. but you and your colleagues are able then to collate all this information, run the numbers, look at the data, and then tell us what you're finding and keep updating people.
That's right. So here's what's going to happen as a member is we're going to teach you how to play these games with very simple videos. Then you're going to be able to play the games using either your normal desktop computer, or if you have a mobile device like an iPhone or an iPad, you can use those while you play these games with your dogs. All the instructions are on those devices. And then you just input what your dog is doing. That data goes back to Dognition. Once you're finished, it takes about 80 minutes, but you can break it into any number of sessions if you want to do 10 minutes at a time or 15 minutes at a time, whatever you decide you want to do, or your dog decides it wants to do. Once you finish, all the data goes back to Dognition. You immediately get a 15-page report that explains to you what you just did means and how your dog compares to all the other dogs in our database. So those are the things you can't get on your own. You could potentially play these games on your own, but you won't learn how your dog is similar or different than other dogs, and you can't get a wonderful report that helps you understand what does this mean based on the scientific literature and what can I do with this information.
On your website, you also have, and I love this, it's like you have the Einstein dog and the charmer and the stargazer and the socialite. Okay, I can see the Einstein. That's a smart one. Ace can probably have great reasoning. What's a Renaissance dog and what's a proto dog?
So the Renaissance dog is a dog that's really, it has skills that it's good at everything. Let's say it's not extreme in the strategies it uses. It's sort of right in the middle in terms of how it decides to solve problems relative to other dogs. So it's, good at lots of things, but maybe not, off the charts extreme in any way. And when I say extreme doesn't mean good or bad. It just means that there are different strategies. It's not a dog, for instance. We have a really fun game where you hide something so your dog sees where you hide it, but then you point to another location to indicate that actually it's in the other location. And the question for your dog is, okay, are you a dog that relies on your memory, or are you a dog that relies on your cooperative relationship? And some dogs say, I communicate with you all the time. If you say it's over there, I'm going to go. I trust you, I'm going to go over there. You only do it a couple of times, so don't worry. It's not going to ruin your relationship with your dog. And you get to give them the treat anyway, so don't worry. They won't be mad at you. And
lied to me.
Then some dogs, what they do is they say, okay, I see you pointing, but I just saw it go under the cup, so I'm going to completely ignore you, and I'm going to go use my memory. So it's a great example where you have multiple cognitive strategies that dogs could potentially use to solve a problem. And some dogs are really reliant on one strategy over the other. And the only way to figure out what your dog is relying on is to play these games. You can't just watch them in your normal interaction and know that my dog is a dog that is super reliant relative to other dogs on memory. You can't just watch them and figure out, oh, my dog is super communicative compared to other dogs, even to the point that they ignore what they just saw. And so, that's what a Renaissance dog is sort of in the middle. It would be a dog that sort of isn't really on the extreme either way or the other on that game. So a proto-dog is a dog that's really sort of a little bit wolf-like in its strategies that it takes. So it's going to be a dog that isn't really relying on your communicative cues. It isn't necessarily as bonded with you and a little bit more self-reliant than a lot of other dogs might be. But it's incredibly skilled when it comes to its memory and its ability to reason out problems on its own.
And the one I love, you have to explain it, stargazer. In my mind, I see that going, maybe that's the, I shouldn't say it, Irish setter, kind of really pretty, just sitting there staring out into nothingness. There's not a lot between his little ears. What's a stargazer? As I get a lot of Irish setter people upset with me.
So I, first of all, love Irish setters, and just again, from a personal perspective, I know sort of what you're inferring, but I'll put my science hat on to defend the Irish setter and say not one smidgen of scientific evidence that they are any different than the other breeds.
All right.
So it doesn't mean they're not. It doesn't mean they're not different, but there's no science to say they're different. And maybe Dognition will be one way we find out some hidden things about Irish setters that we didn't know. So the stargazer is, and remember, the idea, if you take a cognitive perspective on intelligence, the idea that there's one individual who's smarter than the other, well, it really doesn't make sense, because if you're a dog that, has been either selected through artificial selection, or you've been, raised and trained to be, really communicative and listen to your owner, well, you're probably going to really pay attention to the gestures and not be so cunning and be really sort of a trustworthy dog. And maybe you don't use your inferential reasoning so much because you're always listening to what the human says. So, that's not a dumb dog because it doesn't rely on inference to solve problems. It's using strategies that make sense given the context with which it lives. And so another dog may be not so communicative and really relies on inference because it doesn't get so much information from its owners and it needs to solve problems on its own. So the stargazer is a dog that really is extreme in the sense that it's not particularly bonded, it's not relying on inference, it's very present-minded, it's not really relying on memory, it's very trustworthy, a very trustworthy dog, and, it's not probably really relying on your communication either. So it's, again, very self-reliant dog.
So far in what you've learned through Dognition and the people who've signed up, what's one of the most fascinating things that you've learned?
Well, I think the number one thing we've learned is that people can do this, and people love it, and the dogs love it. I think that's the number one thing, because, of course, we'd never done this before. So I had very strong notion that people would totally enjoy this and that their dogs would love it, because we've had for, 5 years now, people have been coming to Duke, and we'd been doing it for years before that in Germany, and I'd been doing it at Harvard when I was there. And, lots of other research groups have been doing this all over the world. The one thing I didn't know is would people enjoy doing this on their own? And the absolute screaming answer is yes. People really have enjoyed it. It gives you something to do on that rainy day where, maybe you have a video-obsessed teenager and you'd love to get them involved in something a little bit more fun, give your dog something to do on that rainy day, and learn something at the same time that's useful in your own life but also contributes to a larger endeavor. And so that's the first thing we've learned. And I think the second thing we've learned is actually people are collecting great data. I think what we're seeing in the data is really representative of what we've seen in data collected in our laboratories. So, people can do it is the point. And it's really going to be a very important and powerful tool as we go forward and try to, make things even better for our dogs.
These citizen scientists aren't fudging the data to make their Irish setter look smarter than their neighbor's border collie.
No. And, we have it designed in such a way that we would know immediately. And, the answer is no. It's spot on with what we've seen in the published literature.
We know there's difference in the educational level of U.S. children compared to Swedish or Chinese or whatever. Are you finding there's a difference in the intelligence level, the cognition level of dogs in the United States versus Europe or South America?
So we have not done that yet. We have not, done that analysis in an official way yet. But I can tell you that from Duke, we have definitely seen where we did a comparison of German and American dogs. And I can tell you that I will try to spin this in a positive way for the American dogs. I will try. It was an inhibitory control task. And basically what we found is that American dogs are very uninhibited and German dogs are very inhibited. But actually, being inhibited in this case is very useful to solving the task. So, the German dogs did much better than the American dogs. So I think we're going to see some fun stuff. I really do. I think it's going to be mind-blowing for me, for everybody. We're going to see patterns we didn't know existed. We're going to find out that Irish setters have a genius in memory that we didn't know was there, for instance, or that border collies, they're not remarkable at all when it comes to, being able to solve inferential reasoning problems or whatever it's going to be. And there hasn't really been a way to quantify these things in any serious way before now.
Okay, are you going to be doing this with cats? I'm not doing this test. Go away.
Exactly. Enough said. I think cats are gorgeous and they're wonderful pets. And I think they're just as remarkable and they have their own genius like dogs. But heck, if they want to tell us what it is.
How to be very politically correct. Dr. Hare, I can hear the excitement in your voice. I know everyone else can also. If they want to sign their dog up to be part of the Dognition experience, where do they go? How do they do it? What's the fee?
So Dognition.com, so D-O-G and then Nition, Dognition, and then .com, so Dognition.com. And then you just sign up, and by signing up, it does cost $60, which, you might balk at. Wait a second, I'm paying $60 for what? Well, I can assure you will get value for your money. And step back and think about how much you pay for dog food, how much you pay for treats to keep your dog's stomach happy. And this is the moment to make their minds happy and help us figure out how to make their minds even happier in the future. Because you can go buy a $60 dog toy or two $30 dog toys. They'll be bored in 10 minutes or chew them up and they'll be gone. This is an investment that will last you for the life of the dog, and it'll help you interact with them better. So it's $60, and if you want a membership, it's $10 a month, and you'll get first access to all the findings that we have. We have some great trainers working with us, people like Victoria Stillwell and Kyra Sundance and others, giving us trainer tips, helping us think about how can we use this information that now we have a better read on this individual dog. Can we individualize its training to get a better result? And also there'll be all sorts of interviews with scientists like myself, just talking about what we've learned. And not only that, but there'll be a place for you to interact and ask your questions and disagree with us, because I think one of the fun things about this being a citizen science project is science is not about scientists saying, look, here's how it works and you have to listen to me. It's we're listening. We don't know everything, and we know that. That's what makes us scientists. And we're trying to learn by finding ways to test ideas. And so I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It'll be a beautiful community of people who love dogs.
I love it. Dr. Brian Hare, thank you so much for being with us today. I've learned a lot. I think I'm going to have to get a dog because I only have cats and I want to get involved.
Well, we are going to have a shelter program, so hopefully you can go test some shelter dogs.
I love it. So, Dr. Hare, looking at all these various tests that you can do with Dognition, one of the things I thought about is, okay, I have this dog that I've signed up when it was 6 years of age. It scored in certain ways. It was the charmer. It was whatever. And now I'm doing these tests, and the scores are different. Can I use Dognition in order to check my dog? Is it becoming senile, or is it just ignoring me?
Right. Oh, that's a wonderful question. And absolutely, because, this is exactly the idea, to give vets another tool to help people. Especially, I've had lots of dogs that, were wonderful, and they get older and you get worried about what's going on. What do they understand? What do they not understand? And memory, of course, we know very well declines with age in many dogs. So what if some of the problems your dog is experiencing is actually it's having some memory decline? But, well, how would you know that? And this gives you that tool. Is there's some great memory games, and you'll be able to see, wow, my dog is really present-minded, and it'll help the vet make some recommendations for that individual how to deal with a dog that has some memory loss.
So you can teach that old dog new tricks, just a matter of whether or not they remember them.
That's right. That's right.
Well, you've been listening to Dr. Bernadine Cruz on The Pet Doctor on Pet Life Radio. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back again next week with more information on how to make you the best possible pet owner. Thanks for listening. Take care.
Pets can be a wonderful addition to your life because they're a member of the family. Keeping them healthy and happy is important. Pet Life Radio presents The Pet Doctor with veterinary media consultant and veterinarian Dr. Bernadine Cruz. Whether you have a dog, cat, reptile, or rabbit, you'll find answers for your pets straight from the vets. The Pet Doctor, on demand every week, only on PetLifeRadio.com.